Zayne's anecdote number 1, A Pure White Heart. Chapter 1, The Legendary Dr. Zayne. The office looms in front of John. To say he's nervous is an understatement. Since the beginning of his internship at Asco Hospital, he has heard the rumors about the chief of surgery, Dr. Zayne. They say he's an extremely cold person. He never talks to interns unless it's about work. If he finds out you made a mistake, he rips you a new one. On top of that, he never socializes with his colleagues outside of work. He lives at his office, he doesn't have any friends. All he does is work, functioning like a surgical machine without a sliver of humanity. They also say Zayne knows the best ways to get to your heart. Well, literally. He's the best cardiac surgeon in Lincoln City, and even more so in the medical field. That's why, despite being terrified of him, interns all hope to learn from him. John is one such intern. The moment he realized he was assigned to the division of cardiac surgery this week, he was so excited and nervous that he couldn't sleep for the past 2 days. He stands now with 2 dark circles under his eyes, outside the office door. Opening the door, John is greeted by the sight of a spacious, neat office. Zayne is eating his lunch at his desk, completely unperturbed. Other than eating, he occasionally pushes up his gold-rimmed glasses. Zayne turns his head when John walks over. The mere movement fills John with excitement. "Hello, Dr. Zayne. I'm an intern at the Division of Cardiac Surgery this week. I'm John." As he stumbles through the first few sentences, he realizes Zayne looked at his computer, not him. John speaks faster. His name, school, major, how long he had been at the previous division. Dr. Zayne would want him to condense everything within 1 minute. Zayne says nothing. By the time John is done, he finishes his meal. Everything he does is calculated, quick. Zayne puts his chopsticks in the box, closes the lid, and puts everything in the trash after cleaning his desk. Then, he wipes down his hands with a wipe and uses a hand sanitizer. Picking up his access card and leaving the office, Zayne finally speaks to John. The next surgery will involve cardiopulmonary bypass. Observe, speak up if you have any questions. Chapter 2, Expert Surgeon. The operating room is quiet. Under the light, the patient's chest cavity is already open. Intubate. Aorta. Superior and inferior vena cava. Zayne oversees the process, guiding the first and second surgeon's assistants for the upcoming tasks. Cardiopulmonary bypass. Administer the cardioplegia. The blood pumps steadily through the heart-lung machine, and within moments, the heart stops beating. All right, let me do this. Zayne takes over the first assistant's work once everything is stable. John stands the furthest away. He strains to see what Zayne is doing, but he can't see anything. John is a little annoyed. He imagines it would be great if he could be Zayne's surgical assistant. Not only could he witness the operation process up close, but he could also get Zayne's guidance. But if he isn't good enough, he'll be reprimanded. John pales at the thought of being scolded by the doctor. The surgery is extraordinarily long. Standing in silence for a while is tiring for everyone except for Zayne and the first assistant, Grayson. It's Grayson who breaks the silence. "What did you do in the operating room before, John?" Startled, John knows the most stressful moment for all interns is upon him, being asked a question by someone higher in the hospital hierarchy. I worked with Dr. Lewis. Hepatobiliary, and pulled the hooks during surgery. Grayson smiles. Dr. Lewis, huh? He's a great teacher. He invited us to this place for cow dung hot pot after an operation once. John has tried it before. Cow dung hot pot? That's the one where they mix a cow's half-digested stomach contents and bile, right? The nurse shudders. Half-digested food? Bile? Is that edible? And isn't bile bitter? The moment Grayson opens his mouth, words just stream out like a fountain. It's only a little bitter. It's quite nice when you eat it hot. Dr. Lewis didn't have any though because he was called back to the hospital. Something about a student losing something in the lab? When the conversation becomes more and more lively, Zayne suddenly speaks. Maybe they lost a gallbladder. Grayson's smile stiffens. Everyone straightens their posture. Their expressions are more serious than the ones that they'd have if they were yelled at. John can't decide if Zayne is joining in on the fun or reminding everyone that they're working. All he knows is that his stomach is churning, and he can't help but think, this expert heart surgeon is truly terrifying. Chapter 3. Scarier than a demon. The next morning, 2 sets of mismatched footsteps echo down the hall. One is quick and heavy, while the other one follows hurriedly. You didn't say much yesterday. I didn't expect you to be so lively. The moment they go upstairs, Grayson is bombarded with John's questions about Zayne. It gives him a headache. Well, Dr. Zayne isn't here, and checking on the patients is relatively easy. I'm not as nervous. It's only easy because you haven't met any with particularly nasty attitudes. The kind that refuse to be treated or take their medicine? Grayson shakes his head with a pretense of maturity. You know nothing. As they speak, they arrive at the door of Ward 3. When John notices where they are, he recalls relevant information. Zach, the patient in Ward 3's bed 12, underwent a heart valve replacement surgery last week. He has to stay in the hospital for 3 weeks for observation and is expected to be discharged this week. Then what should I do if I encounter even... An unusual noise comes to the door before John can even finish his question. Hurry. Careful now. Sir, you're going to hurt your teeth. Damn it. He's definitely causing trouble again. Grayson says as he pushes open the door. Help us. John follows. Inside, 2 nurses are holding young Zach, tying him down. By the time Grayson approaches them, the nurses have tightened the last strap. Another nurse reaches for whatever he's biting down on. He resists, twisting and turning as he cries out. What happened to the special care we were supposed to give? Grayson asks. What's in his mouth? An access card? The nurse is sweating from tying up Zach, or maybe from anger. He took it when I wasn't looking. John looks at Zach, who is unable to move, but still restless. Do we need sedatives? He has a history of cerebral infarction, so let's avoid that if possible. Leave it to me. Grayson maneuvers behind the nurse on the left and reaches for the access card tightly clenched between Zach's teeth. Zach mumbles something incoherent, but from his tone, it's clear that he's saying he'll swallow the card if anyone tries to take it from him. The access card is small. If he really wants to, he definitely could do it. Grayson doesn't want to force it, so he backs off. Just then, somebody opens the door. Everyone is quiet. Only Zach, who has his eyes closed, is still crying out. Zayne nears the bed and knocks on the bedside table. Where does it hurt? The moment he speaks, Zach stops moving. Opening his eyes, Zach catches a glimpse of Zayne. The old man swallows his cry, and the only thing he can be heard is his unsteady breathing. After a while, Zach tucks his chin in and looks away. Within moments, he goes from a stubborn old man to a guilty child. Zayne points at his mouth. Zach loosens his jaw, but he still holds on to the access card. Spit it out. Zayne sounds calm, but everyone around him shudders at his words. Zach finally spits out the card. He quickly begins to talk. I'm so bored. No one would talk to me, so I thought... Zayne looks at the old man and says nothing, his eyes revealing nothing. I'll stay with you. Zach gulps, wraps himself in his duvet, and lies back down on the bed without a word. Zayne looks away from the old man and then mutters something to the nurse. Then, he leaves. The ward falls quiet, as if the commotion earlier didn't happen at all. John tries to calm his racing heart, and a chill racks his entire body. Dr. Zayne is scary by being able to frighten even an old man. Chapter 4. Under the Sunlight. John learns from the nurses that the old man from Ward 3 is not the only one who listens to Zayne. All of his patients, no matter how temperamental or troublesome, become obedient and meek in front of him. As expected of Zayne, the man is said to have been able to terrify anyone. In front of the building, the moment Grayson hears Zayne is terrifying, he laughs so hard he's almost sent into the psychiatrics. John is instantly regretting saying those words, worried it'll make its way to Zayne. He repeatedly shushes Grayson. Grayson slowly stops laughing. When I first met Zayne, I felt the same way. He had this stay away vibe. John nods. Yes, the stay away vibe is strong. But Zayne isn't that hard to get to know, Grayson says with a smile, patting John's shoulder. The sun shines on the garden. Most people sitting on the grass were wearing hospital gowns or trying to find a good spot to sit in the sun. John looks for Zach in the crowd. He heard from the other patients in Ward 3 that the old man got permission from the nurses to stretch his legs. After doing half a lap around the gardens, John finally sees a familiar group of elderly people. He spots Zach sitting at a stone table, his hand lifting and lowering from time to time. He's playing chess. John's view of his opponent is obscured by the bushes. He moves to the other side, away from the bushes. The person playing chess with Zach is Zayne, who wears normal, regular clothes. John's jaw drops. According to the schedule at the hospital, it's Zayne's day off today. Zayne only takes a day or two off every month, but here he is, spending his precious downtime playing chess with Zach. John doesn't approach and just watches. Zach squeezes the piece in his hand, putting it down and picking it up again. After some serious thinking, he finally makes a move. You lost. Zayne moves his rook on top of Zach's king. I lost again! Zach scratches his head and then pats it twice. Dr. Zayne, you should go easy on an old man like me. Let's play again. We already agreed this was the last round. Zayne packs away the pieces in a slow manner. You must keep your promise now that you lost. Go get a checkup tomorrow. Zach's peppered brow furrows. He leans back and waves his hands. No, I'm not going. If you don't, another doctor will see you. Zayne's words were lukewarm, but they sound quite threatening to Zach. Zach lowers his hands and purses his lips. He looks reluctant and maybe a little disgruntled. John can hear Zach mumble something under his breath. Even you don't care about me, huh, Dr. Zayne? Zayne closes the chessboard with a soft sigh. Don't worry, I'll accompany you, he says, sounding more friendly than before. Zach stares at the grass for a while. Okay then, he says quietly. But Zayne isn't that hard to get to know. Grayson's voice rings in John's ears. Ever been to radiology? Most patients are accompanied by their families, but there are a lot of lonely elders like Zach. Their family members only show up before surgery. They sign some papers, confirm the surgery is successful, and then leave. The elderly are always alone during observation. They must feel sad seeing other patients with their families. That's why the care of the nurses and doctors are important to them. Caring for them to the extent that Zayne does, though, is rare. He's drawn back from his thoughts at the sight of the old man and Zayne talking and laughing. For the first time, John doesn't feel Zayne's coldness. It's almost as if it's been melted away by the same sunlight that blankets the grass beneath them. Chapter 5. Once ice melts. At noon, John stands in front of Zayne's office with Zach's report in hand. After knocking a few times and getting no response, he carefully pushes the half-closed door. Inside, Zayne is leaning back against his chair. His eyes are closed, appearing to be asleep. John tiptoes into the office and places the report on the table. Zayne doesn't move, nor does he open his eyes. Has this afternoon's surgery started? Not yet. It's an hour away. You still have time to rest, John says quickly. Zayne lets out a soft and sits up. Remember to check on bed 32, he says as he wipes his brow. Okay. John has already memorized every patient in the hospital. Bed 32 is Jane, and they checked on her yesterday. But Zayne continues. Call her family and tell them that they must come with her to her examination tomorrow morning." "Understood." John knows Jane's examination tomorrow includes an enhanced CT scan that requires a contract agent. "If they can't make it, you go with her." "Right," John says after a pause. Zayne notices John's brief hesitation. "Is there a problem?" he asks, glancing at him. John, no longer scared of Zayne as he was before, speaks, albeit a little wearily. "Jane doesn't seem to trust me that much. Wouldn't it be..." Zayne thinks for a bit. "When I first started, I did a lot to earn the trust of my patients. They know who actually cares about them." After a few beats of silence, John says, "I understand. Every intern is prone to be influenced by powerful teachers. That's why, at this moment, John feels Zayne's teachings have been ingrained into him." Final chapter, Chapter 6, The Best Doctor. The next morning, as John is taking Jean back to the ward, his phone starts ringing. The caller ID shows it's a nurse from the Division of Cardiac Surgery. The nurse speaks concisely through the phone. Zayne's second assistant is unwell. John is to replace him immediately. The info takes John by surprise. He struggles to process it and is a little stunned. It isn't until he's changed into his lab coat that he truly understands and realizes that he has the opportunity to be Zayne's assistant. After confirming that he has properly put on his mask, cap, and shoes in the mirror, John sanitizes his hands and watches as the door of the operating room slowly opens before him. Under the light, Zayne stands by the operating table. Beside him, there is an empty spot where the second assistant should be. John can hardly believe it. He is actually allowed to stand there. It's a heart transplant surgery with a difficulty akin to walking on a tightrope with a cliff. Any small mistake could result in severe bleeding for the patient. John carefully observes and performs his assigned tasks, and when it comes to the crucial moment, he doesn't even dare to blink. He watches as Zayne's hands skillfully manipulate the surgical tools, implanting the artificial heart and completing the positioning of the other devices. Everything is ready, and the pump has been turned off. Now, all that's left is to wait for the heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. John holds his breath and focuses, silently counting the seconds in his mind. He feels like it's a century. Then, the data appears. The patient's heart beats once more. The artificial heart is working. A man deemed to be dying in the medical field is alive again. Although John had a thorough understanding of this technique back in med school, he now realizes that theory is no match for practice. This experience is surreal, leaving him in awe. He can't help but look at Zayne, trying to find a similar excitement in the surgeon's eyes. But Zayne simply announces the success of the surgery calmly. Then, he turns and walks away from the operating table. That's right. Dr. Zayne should be used to this type of surgery by now. After leaving the operating room, John still can't help but want to talk to Zayne. Before Zayne can leave, John asks hesitantly, "Dr. Zayne, why did you call for me today?" Zayne continues washing his hands without even looking up. "You needed to write a paper about this subject." John is taken aback, his gratitude preventing him from fully expressing himself. He settles for a simple, "Thank you, Dr. Zayne." At his time at the Division of Cardiac Surgery approaches its end, John is reluctant to leave. His fear of Zayne has little by little begun to melt in the warm sun since the day in the garden, completely disappearing in that operating table. The day before he's scheduled to leave, a student who is about to be rotated in approaches him and asks, "How was it to work with Dr. Zayne? I heard he's scary, but he's a really good surgeon. I'm conflicted." Now hearing the others describe Zayne as scary makes John want to defend him. Don't listen to them. Dr. Zayne isn't scary at all." John is at a loss for words, and despite rattling his brain for half a day, all he can say is this: he's the best doctor I've ever had the pleasure to meet. Zayne's second anecdote, Never-Ending Winter. Chapter 1. Night's Daytime Brightness. All Zayne sees is a world of ice and snow. He steps over dozens of bodies, blood still dripping from his hands. With a wave, dark crystals pierce through several others, still struggling. There are no screams. It's so quiet that only the sound of his own footsteps can be heard. There is only a shivering little boy. Zayne stands before him, his shadow looming across the boy's blood-covered face. Afraid, the boy is silent. He can only look up at Zayne with wide, shining eyes. After a moment of silence, the wind rises. Zayne raises his hand, dark crystals once again forming on his palm. Ladies and gentlemen, we will arrive at Marion Airport in 30 minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts. Following the slightly mechanical-sounding announcement, Zayne opens his eyes. There is no snow, no death. Everything is as peaceful, calm as it always is. Zayne takes one of the plane's disinfectant wipes and cleans the non-existent blood off his hands. These hands have mended heart valves and saved hearts. Yet for the past 10 years, these same hands have ended countless lives in an endlessly repeating dream. Zayne, we're almost there. His mentor's voice interrupts his thoughts. Beside him, the energetic professor notices Zayne's serious expression. It's normal to be nervous. You only just started working and now you're being sent to the Arctic for an important rescue mission. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. There is a lot of traffic at Mount Eternal. Once the medical team arrives at Marion Airport, a helicopter takes them to the EVOL Special Rescue Unit's location. In the unsteady helicopter, Zayne ignores his discomfort and looks out the window. Outside, as the flurry of snow slowly dissipates, the foreboding Mount Eternal comes into view. The rescue unit is stationed on the mountain's southern side. The snow has stopped, and the ground, an ugly color from the muddy water, is covered in footprints. Before he can even get to the area for cardiac surgery, Zayne hears the faint sounds of sirens behind him. Turning around, he sees several ambulances speeding off in his direction. Dozens of medics emerge from the various tents around him, ready to go. Make way! Make way! What happened? Open fracture on the lower left leg, major artery damaged, specific details unclear. Apply pressure to stop the bleeding first. What's their blood pressure? What's their heart rate? In the blink of an eye, the narrow space becomes more crowded. It's different from the organized chaos in regular hospitals. Right now, everything in front of him is more urgent, rushed. Are there any surgeons? We need a cardiac surgeon. Dr. William and the others are still in the operating room. Zayne hurries over. I'm Zayne from the medical team. How's the patient? 23-year-old soldier, body temperature at 36.3 degrees Celsius, respiratory rate 10 BPM, heart rate 125 BPM, diastolic 70, systolic 90, unconscious. Penetrating cardiac trauma from the sharp object resulting in intrapericardial hemorrhaging. Cardiac tamponade, the doctor quickly reports. Prepare a blood transfusion, Zayne says to the nurse. The patient is transferred to the hospital bed as the nurse rushes in with the crash cart. Zayne cuts open the patient's clothes and discovers a bullet fragment lodged deep in the chest cavity. Zayne? Dr. Zayne, right? The nurse hooks up the patient to an IV bag. The patient's heart rate is below 50 BPM. Zayne puts on his gloves as he watches the dropping blood pressure. We need to operate now. But an urgent alarm from the monitor interrupts the nurse and Zayne's expression changes. The patient's heart has stopped. Get an oxygen mask. Prepare the bag valve mask and notify the anesthesiologist to assist with intubation. The nurse promptly does as she's told. But Dr. Zayne, what should we do? The bullet fragment is still in his chest cavity. We can't perform chest compressions." "Then we proceed with an open chest cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Bring the thoracotomy instruments and contact the operating room nurse to prepare the OR." She's shocked. "OC CPR? Hurry." Donning protective clothing, Zayne disinfects himself. With a steady hand, he cuts along the left side of the sternum, slicing the subcutaneous tissue and muscle with an electrosurgical knife. In one seamless motion, the pleural cavity is opened, revealing the bullet fragment and the pericardium, which continues to bleed. Zayne remembers the cardiac ultrasound image shown to him by the doctor, confirming that removing this bullet wouldn't cause further harm to the patient. Without hesitation, he makes incisions along the pericardium and extracts the fragment. The blood accumulated with the pericardium gushes out. The suction device in his hand is already in position. Suture. The suction is complete within a matter of seconds. I found the source of bleeding. Yet the patient's heartbeat still hasn't resumed. Without a moment's hesitation, Zayne reaches into the patient's pericardial cavity and grasps the still heart. The nurse can't help but gasp. While it's theoretically feasible, every medical professional knows the immense difficulty and low success rate of performing emergency open chest CPR. However, Zayne remains completely focused. He gently squeezes the heart with the utmost care, one beat at a time. The harsh winds cut through the thick tent and dozens of heaters. The chill flows in from the gaps and washes over the beds. The nurse tightly closes the curtains next to her, only to see tiny beads of sweat forming on Zayne's forehead. Beep, 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 beep. The blaring alarm stops, and the heart in his hand begins to beat. Zayne glances at the ECG monitor. Only then does his tense nerves slightly loosen. "The operating room is ready, Dr. Zayne." "What happened, Zayne?" His instructor hurries over. When he takes in what occurred, he breathes out a sigh of relief. "Good work, Zayne. Let's move him to the OR." The area around the hospital bed becomes busy once more. As Zayne is about to stand up, his gaze lingers on the eval monitor for the soldier's bedside. For a moment, the originally steady beats suddenly spikes to the top of the screen. The surgery went well. Back at the ward, Zayne looks up at the blinding lights above him to gather himself. Only when he drinks a glass of cold water does the tightness in his heart slightly loosen. "Zayne?" A person in a military doctor's uniform pokes his head into the room. Hearing the other man say his name, Zayne frowns in confusion. The man laughs. 35th cohort at the Skyhaven School of Medicine. Medical Sciences MD, PhD, 8-year program, right? Seeing as Zayne still doesn't recognize him, the man stands up straight. 31st cohort of the Skyhaven School of Medicine. Now a medic of the EVOL Special Rescue Unit, William, at your service. As some memories resurface, Zayne's expression relaxes. William. William is a fellow cardiac surgeon. When Zayne worked as an intern, William took him under his wing. William pats him on the arm and says, "Time flies. You're a real doctor now." Seeing the document in Zayne's hands, William takes it and flips through them. "Is it serious?" "It's currently under control." Zayne puts his pen back in his breast pocket. He runs his fingers down the indent of the notebook inside, parallel to each other and right at the top of his heart. He lowers his hand and accompanies William to the ward. "When did you arrive?" "The night of the incident," William says. Seeing Zayne look around, he smiles bitterly. "Bad, right? But it's already a lot better than before. I'll show you around. There are a couple tricky patients at the moment. They've all been buried in the snow for too long after being attacked by wanderers, especially the ones who just got the heart transplant. We might need your help with..." A distant roar resounds, following closely by the loud sound of collapsing snow and gravel. William sighs. "Seems like we won't be getting any sleep tonight either. Let's go. It'll be a while before the injured arrive. We'll talk in the meantime." Zayne follows William. He turns around to see the distant Mount Eternal lit up, as bright as day, as flash bombs. Chapter 2. Deathly Encounter. Zayne hasn't left the ward for several days. The battle rages on, with the wounded being sent in one by one. Just as Zayne releases soldiers who arrived for treatment earlier that day, 3 bloody stretchers get pushed in. Most can't handle the long hours and stress. 4 people already collapsed from his medical team alone. Taking over yet another exhausted colleague's patient in critical condition, Zayne leaves instructions before he adjusts the ventilator. He makes 2 rounds around the ward, and after confirming everything is as it should be, he walks out of the tent for a breather. The freezing air in his lungs wakes him. It's late, and the giant searchlight covers the snow. In the dark, Mount Eternal looks like a sleeping beast. "Are you still working, Dr. Zayne?" A passing soldier carrying steel greets him. Zayne nods. "Captain Xander?" Zayne helped 2 soldiers under the captain's command, and they became friends. The captain stomps his snow-covered boots. "It's cold out here, Dr. Zayne. Why don't you go in and rest? I haven't seen you take a break for days." "I just woke up," Zayne says. In truth, he can't even remember when was the last time he closed his eyes. The continuous resuscitations and surgeries are like an endless marathon. He's so exhausted that he doesn't even have the energy to have a nightmare. Besides, the reality he is in right now is far more real and bloody. "What's the steel for?" He changes the subject. "They said we don't have enough wards, so we got asked to get a couple more tents up." Captain Xander wipes the snow off his head. "It's weird. There have been many rescue operations before, and they even gave us new equipment. But somehow, more people are injured. Damn, it's almost like there are endless waves of wanderers." Remembering the recent anomalous eval reports, Zayne ruminates. The sharp sound of an alarm pierces through the calmness, and Zayne is back inside the ward almost instantly. A nurse rushes to him and reports that a soldier is in cardiac arrest. As Zayne listens, his heart sinks. It is the same one discharged the day before. Administer 1 dose of adrenaline intravenously. Got it. Where's the defibrillator? Almost here. The soldier, who bid him a farewell with a smile not too long ago, is pale under his oxygen mask, showing hints of blue. One doctor is performing CPR while the other holds the soldier's chin and pinches the breathing bag. A nurse rushes over with a defibrillator. She nimbly slathers conductive gel on the pads and hands them to Zayne. 360 joules, Zayne mumbles. A muffled bang resounds. The heart monitor continues to beep loudly. Steady. 1, 2, 3. Beep, beep. Beep, beep. Again. Beep. The sky slowly brightens. Snow falls once more, sitting atop the tent. William brushes snow off his uniform and enters the ward. He sees Zayne giving instructions and waits by the side. Give him 2 blood bags. When Zayne finishes, he walks to William. Are you here for the death certificate, Will? Yeah, he was in our team. Zayne walks over to his document-littered desk and opens the drawer. 23. Time of death? 5:47 a.m. William sighs. He was too young. His father was also a soldier, killed during that disaster. Followed in his footsteps and joined the army. Who knew? Zayne is silent for a moment. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize. William forces himself to smile, trying to lighten up the mood. You've worked in and day out without sleep. Everyone knows you tried your best. Zayne doesn't reply, his eyes revealing no emotion. William pauses for a moment. Zayne, it's normal to want to save everyone since you just started here. But as long as we try, it's okay if we don't save them. We did what we could. He pats Zayne's shoulder. Don't blame yourself too much. Thank you, Will. I'm fine. Zayne's phone buzzes in his pocket. He takes it out. I still have a surgery to attend. I'll take my leave now. He gives William a nod and hurries off to change. Zayne is once again in a world of ice and snow. But this time, a white figure stands in place of the corpses and blood. Under the raging blizzard, Zayne walks towards him, dark crystals forming on his hands once more. The figure doesn't move. He's waiting to die. The moment the crystals soar, the wind stops. And in that split second, Zayne sees the other man. It's him in a white coat. Zayne opens his eyes. The inside of the tent is dimly lit. His tired colleagues are all nestled in their own simple beds, sleeping soundly. Zayne props himself up with one arm, wipes sweat from his face and neck with his sleeves, and slowly slows his breathing. Reaching under his pillow, he feels for the notebook. Zayne's fingers hesitate for a moment, and then he takes it out. The cover's indents now form a complete tally mark, one of which is from today. Since coming here, 3 patients died under his care. He strokes the carved marks. For each one, he vividly remembers every dose of medication, every surgery, and every harrowing resuscitation. Yet they still died. It's impossible to save everyone. He knows this better than anyone else, yet he still insists, persists. The Grim Reaper in his dreams mocks him for his folly, futility, and competence. It wants to kill his desire to save everyone, but he's not planning to give up. Chapter 3. Determination. There's a loud noise. Half of the operating room's wall comes crashing down, and a horrible mangled body climbs in from the outside. The medics who were focused on the surgery freeze in fear, unable to even scream, as the Wanderer lunges straight for the operating table. Just before the Wanderer can reach it, the creature is sent flying past the destroyed wall. Watch the patient. Zayne quickly pulls a surgical drape over the patient's chest. He throws a lancet, and countless sharp crystals embedded themselves into the Wanderer. In the blink of an eye, blue smoke fills the room and a protocore falls to the ground. Everything quiets down, leaving only the gasps of those who are still in shock. Is the patient in stable condition? The anesthesiologist grips the table. Yeah. Ask if there's an operating room. We'll move there. Zayne looks at the second surgeon's assistant, who's frozen on the ground. Quickly now. The surgery ends without any complications. As Zayne returns to the ward, he hears his colleagues' worried comments about the Wanderers and unrelenting snowstorm. I heard a Wanderer attack the operating room. Are you all right? William walks over. When Zayne says it's fine, William lets out a sigh of relief. Remembering why he came here in the first place, he asks in a hushed tone. Hey, did you submit a report to our commander? Why was I told... Zayne? His mentor stands at the entrance to the ward, his expression serious. Come here. A transfer order rests on the desk, stamped with the hospital's red seal. The hospital told you to return. The medical field can't afford to lose another person. His instructor hands him the documents. Pack your things. A car will take you to the airport later. When Zayne doesn't move, the old professor snaps. I know what you're thinking, but now is not the time for you to show off. Being able to deduce a change in Mount Eternal's protofield from the patient's abnormalities is helpful to the mission. But that's where your duty ends. He once again shoves the paper in Zayne's hands. Med school didn't teach you everything so you could die young. I'm enough for the cardiac surgical team here. Zayne clenches his hands. I'm sorry, but I have to stay. He takes out a pass, 2 lines engraved deeply into the card by the HQ stamp. Name Zayne, Detachment Evol Special Rescue Unit, Special Operations. I'm going to the center of Mount Eternal's protofield to assist them. When did you... The professor's furious. He slams the table. Even if you want to study the cause of the patient's changes, the protofield's abnormalities could lead to even greater tragedies if you... He doesn't want to say any more. Zayne looks at his instructor's gray hair and steps forward to hold his hand. This is my duty. Don't worry. I'll return safe and sound. If he can't save everyone, then he'll go to the root of the problem and eliminate it. Leaving the tent, William takes a deep breath. Empathize with him, will ya? It's hard to train a doctor. On top of that, you're his favorite. Of course he wouldn't want you to risk your life. But don't worry. He shows his card similar to Zayne's. As a fellow doctor, I'll make sure you get back unharmed. Zayne is surprised for a moment. Then he relaxes. Thank you, William. William smiles and stretches his hand out to him. Welcome to the team. Chapter 4. Through Troubled Times. A week later, a special operations team composed of 30 elite members entered Mount Eternal's fully armed. Our mission is to find the center of the protofield and eliminate it to stop the creation of Wanderers. The speculated location is in the valley of the Northern Cliff. This operation is more difficult and even more dangerous than any others before, so you must all strictly follow orders and do everything in the name of safety. As the leader of the group, Captain Xander, pauses. His lecture about the precautions to grab a map, William comes over and asks Zayne, "Who did you address your will to?" He's curious about whom Zayne, emotionless as he is, holds dear in his heart. Zayne instead deflects the question, "Who did you address yours to?" William coughs and says in a different voice, "I'll introduce you when we get back." Despite getting mentally prepared, Zayne didn't expect getting back to become an unobtainable luxury. As they venture deeper into the mountain range, the terrain becomes more treacherous, and the energy fluctuations are more violent. For each step forward, the operations team has to fight, costing them time and energy. With every teammate that falls, the tally marks on Zayne's notebooks increases. At that same time, he goes from being a combat medic to a soldier. Still, the bloodshed doesn't let up. The Grim Reaper in his dreams appears once again, staring at him with cold eyes. With another narrow escape from death, Captain Xander has to make the decision. They alone cannot hold back the protofield's energy fluctuations. If they keep going, it'll only lead to more casualties. They must act quickly and destroy the protofield's center. When William returns to the tent, Zayne is dressing his wounds. A large injury on his right arm is open again, blood oozing out. William sighs and hands him a bottle of medication. As a doctor, shouldn't you know how important your arm is? There are other ways of saving people that don't involve you taking hits from Wanderers on their behalf. I know what I'm doing. I don't think you do, William asks. Zayne, I've always felt like you're more desperate than others when it comes to saving people. I've seen dedicated medical staff, but none as persistent as you. Is it something weighing you down? No, Zayne answers. There is. Not at all. When Zayne is done dressing his wounds, he takes out his sleeping bag and lies down in a way to show that he wishes to rest and not be disturbed. William remains where he is, clearly unwilling to leave it until he gets an answer. The two are at a stalemate. In the end, Zayne admits defeat. Years ago, he says after a long time, I almost killed somebody important. William is surprised. What happened? Holding the ice-cold air with his right hand, Zayne lets go. I lost control of my evil. That night, the blood in his hands kept dripping to the ground, dripping to his dreams. The summer when he was 12 was extraordinarily long. With every little thing, like the ivy climbing up the courtyard wall, the stall that sells popsicles, the swings in the park, is clear in his mind, as if it was yesterday. A snowstorm ended that summer. It was the first time a black-robed Grim Reaper appeared in his dreams. Chapter 5. A Long Way Home. The day grows shorter. The night, with the relentless snowstorm, descends on Mount Eternal. By the time the team reaches the valley, they are down to less than half of their original number. Outside, the blizzard rages on. Yet inside, it's strangely calm. The dense forest is filled with dead trees, standing tall like tombstones. A faint blue light flickers on the black, broken branches. The continuous ringing of the detection alarm and the sight in front of them all point to one thing: the protofield's center. Looking at the scarred but determined faces of his teammates, Captain Xander says in a deep voice, "Let's begin." "Yes, sir." Everyone quickly and quietly gets ready to destroy the protofield's center. Orientator calibration. Done. Electrical current ready. Metaflux barrier test initiated. 1. Bunker is ready. Anti-protofield system is set up. Limit of protofield strength reached. Transmission progress at 75%. Magnetic field coordinates confirmed. 57, 31, 64. Transmission progress has reached 100%. Everything is ready. In an instant, a deafening roar fills the air. Sand and rock fragments fly through the valley along the millions of energy particles. The blizzard rushes in. The violent energy fluctuation causes dozens of wanderers to gather. Captain Xander, shocked, yells into the howling wind, "Stay alert! Don't fall asleep! There are wanderers!" At the sight of one of the creatures swinging a weapon at an unconscious teammate, he lunges at it. A wall of ice, several meters high, erupts from the ground and pierces the wanderer's protocore. Zayne grips his right arm with his left. He uses his evol to freeze his weak legs, forcing him to stand. "Get them to safety first. I'll handle this." Several icicles pierce the wanderers. He grits his teeth. His mouth tastes like rust. A large energy fluctuation has been detected on the north side of Mount Eternal. Metaflux levels have surpassed the 3rd threshold. Target area is shifting. Signal reestablished. After disappearing for so long, HQ finally gets a signal from the operations team. Within the garrison, everyone gets to work. The commander picks up the intercom and says, "The protofield in Mount Eternal has been destroyed. I repeat, the protofield in Mount Eternal has been destroyed. All units head to Mount Eternal and bring back special operations." The sun is rising. Peace returns to the valley. Operations. Crackle. Operations. "Do you read?" A hand reaches out from the snow and presses down on the walkie-talkie's button. "Operations. Copy. 294. We'll be there soon. What's the situation? Are there any casualties?" Casualties. Zayne struggles to stand up and sees his teammates scattered across the snow, unconscious. Using all of his strength, he drags them out and checks their breathing, pulses, and injuries. 2 broken arms. 1 possible concussion. Hearing a familiar voice, Zayne moves to the other side of the destroyed wall and finds William talking. Noticing Zayne, William happily waves at him, but winces when he opens his wounds. The remaining smoke from the explosion finally disappears, revealing a gaping hole at the bottom of the valley. Although shocking, it's proof of the protofield's destruction. After checking the vital signs of their remaining teammates, William sighs in relief. "Zayne," he says with a smile, "we can go back." Indeed. Sunlight filters through the clouds and fog. Zayne's heart, always so wound up and tight, finally relaxes. The frozen apocalypse of his dreams did not become a reality. There should be some heating equipment left in the bunker. I'll go look. William pats the snow off him and starts walking. Zayne returns to his senses and is about to help when he stops in his tracks. "Will..." "What is it?" William turns around. Unable to speak, Zayne points. Confused, William looks down. An eerie blue glow appears on his chest. Crystals, beautiful and sinister, slowly beginning to spread. Chapter 6, the final chapter. The nightmare worsens. "What is this?" Suspicious, William touches them. He finds the fine black crystals are now growing on his hand and sting. He tries to wipe them off, fling them off. He even uses his evol to get rid of them. The crystals continue to grow. Sensing something is wrong, Zayne reaches out and is about to touch William's chest when it all happens so suddenly. The crystals accumulate, and William's expression goes from surprise to panicked. What's going on?" But the crystals don't give him any time to react. Within seconds, his limbs corrode, twisting into uncomfortable and strange positions. The air around him explodes. Zayne is tossed several feet back. Will! Stay away from me, William shouts. His bones and muscles are torn and start to dissolve. He cries out in pain. Zayne grits his teeth and forces him to calm down. He tries to use his evol to freeze the crystals. Frost covers William's body, halting the crystals only for a few seconds. But it didn't stop them from spreading. A few seconds should be enough. Zayne holds his breath, gathering the frost once more. Zayne! The crystals explode. Zayne feels a sharp pain across his forehead, blood blurring his vision. He staggers and hears William shout through the pain. Forget it. Leave me to... Before he can finish, countless crystals fragments fly at Zayne. Zayne barely dodges them as he tries to fight against the crystals on William's body using evol. However, his body begins to fail him. Pain explodes through his shoulder, fragments embedding themselves into his flesh. Zayne trembles. No, you'll get taken down with me. The crystals consuming bone, devouring marrow, climb to his neck. His arms, moving on their own, attack Zayne. William watches with dread as his body becomes twisted and gnarled. It's already too late. Kill me. Zayne's mind goes blank. There's still hope. As long as I can freeze it. Blood fills his mouth. He grits his teeth. Hold on. Please. Again and again, the ice tries to freeze the horrifying black crystals. They fail again and again and again. It's no use. As if a million little knives were piercing through his head, William uses his remaining strength to say, Help me. The tissue underneath the crystal rapidly forms a strange shell. For the first time, Zayne realizes that life, which always represents hope and salvation, can be terrifyingly ugly. His movements slow down. What can he do? Can he do anything? He can't. Not anymore. Living like a monster with no hope for deliverance. Is that redemption? Crystals have encased William's body, leaving only his eyes, which stare at Zayne with a mix of pain and hope. The figures in Zayne's nightmares merge with William. Their expressions are distorted by pain, their bodies twisted into grotesque positions. Unable to speak, their minds gone, their eyes can only beg, Kill me. Kill me. I don't want to become a monster. Snow falls again. Zayne moves his stiff fingers. The icicles in his palm are coated in blood, soaked with boundless black. William's body takes a few steps and falls, eventually dissipating into a grayish-blue smoke. The people he killed in his dreams appear once more, body after body sprawled in front of him, turning the valley into a giant tomb. The wind reverberates into a mournful howl, sounding like a sorrowful cry from the sky, or the cries of wails of countless people on the verge of death. Warm, sticky blood gurgles, melting with the crystallized snow, which quickly freezes again. It melts and freezes over and over, turning into a tombstone. Zayne watches one of these winding trails of blood. His blood. He looks up. The Grim Reaper stands in the distance, watching him on the snowy mountain covered in blood and death. 3 years later. The surgery will be difficult, but we'll try it. Transfer him here. Zayne finishes his remote consultation in his office when Grayson knocks on the door. Dr. Zayne, here's the Lind Award. He carefully puts down the box. Did you actually ask them to deliver this? It's a very prestigious award in the field of medicine. I can't believe you didn't even go to the ceremony. I had an outpatient to take care of that day. I couldn't go. Grayson is shocked. Was it not possible to reschedule? Some patients book 2 to 3 months in advance so they can have time to travel. I can't reschedule. He looks over his computer screen. Do you have nothing else to do? Grayson leaves immediately. After his work is complete, Zayne opens the box. Text is etched onto the side of the exquisite award. Dr. Zayne successfully performed the world's first abdominal aorta repair using EVOL technology. He saved a patient who was attacked by wanderers. This is both a miracle and a monumental moment in medicine. He shoves the box deep into the drawer next to another. Inside is an award that belongs to William. He stares at them quietly. His memory of William's crystal-covered body in his moments of death merges with the abnormal crystals in the patient's heart. That blizzard that covers Mount Eternal appeared in front of him once more. The snow buried William's body, and with it, all those secrets. But strange crystals reappeared. The Grim Reaper, hidden in the darkness, opens his merciless eyes once again. This uncertain, cursed fate is far from over. Zayne's anecdote number 3, Still in Dark. Chapter 1, Visitor. When Zayne first appeared, Georgie thought he had seen the Grim Reaper. He and his mother cowered in a corner with no means of escaping, pursued relentlessly by a monster. Letting out a terrifying roar, the creature approached them. It wore human clothing, and it bore a human-like visage, but its veiny skin grotesquely bulged. Its pupils glowed a sinister, unnatural blue. Its aura was anything but human. Suddenly, his mother pushed Georgie away. With all her might, she embraced the monster, and from beneath its skin, strange tendrils burst forth, resembling eerie blue hooks. They embedded themselves into her. Through the tears blurring his vision, Georgie saw a black figure enter the alley. Just as clouds parted, cold moonlight illuminated the person's black coat. He drew closer, his face emotionless, a sharp dagger in human form. "Help!" A child's voice, young and shaky, cut abruptly through the dark, narrow alley. The monster released the hooks in Georgie's mother and whirled around to pounce on the figure. A garbled voice resounded. A starved beast had spotted easy prey. The man took off the black leather glove on his right hand. Georgie caught only a glimpse of a thin beam of light shining between the man's fingers. It was shaped like a shard of ice. In the blink of an eye, it hurled itself towards the monster, piercing its heart. Frozen and nailed in place by an invisible force, the monster gazed down at its impaled chest, gasping for air. The man walked towards it. With each step, the tendril on the monster's body fractured bit by bit. When he reached the creature, it collapsed. Its body convulsed a few times before becoming motionless. He bent down to inspect the corpse, then slipped his leather glove back on. The monster dissipated like mist, leaving behind only a dark blue fragment. "Are you the Grim Reaper?" Georgie asked. The man's gaze lingered on the mother and son. His crystalline pupils gleamed with an inorganic luster under the moonlight. He didn't respond, and he turned to leave. The clouds once again hid the moon, and his shadow swiftly merged with the darkness of the alley. The second time Georgie encounters Zayne, it's at a convenience store. 1 month had passed since then. Well, actually, Georgie had observed him for several days. Zayne lives in an apartment nearby. His outings are unpredictable, and whenever Georgie tries to follow him to see where he goes, he always ends up losing sight of him. The only place Zayne consistently visits is the convenience store. He always picks up a box of chocolates placed on the front of the shelf and proceeds to check out, seemingly indifferent to the kind of chocolate. Georgie finally musters the courage to approach Zayne just after he finishes paying. "Hello. We've met before. I'm Georgie. I know you come here every day to buy chocolate. This is imported chocolate. Here. The 11-year-old boy, noticeably smaller and frailer than the other children, lifts a large glass jar he's holding. Inside it are exquisitely wrapped chocolates in colorful foil wrappers. Looking up at the man towering over him, the boy asks, "Could you help me find the person who killed my mom?" Zayne stares at the young boy, his expression unreadable. After a moment, in a voice as cold as ice, he replies, "That is something you should ask the police about." Chapter 2. Mystery. Detective Ivan thinks he's about to die when he sees Zayne for the first time. The man standing before him, known within the police department as Dawnbreaker, is a mysterious serial killer. He leaves no corpses behind, only scattered fragments of an unknown, dark blue substance. If it weren't for the surveillance cameras that had captured footage of him committing the murders, these victims would simply be considered missing people. And unlike normal murders, this resembles complete reissue. The victims vary in age, gender, and identity, but the only thing they have in common is the shards left at the crime scene. This baffles Ivan the most. The fragments, emitting a faint blue glow, remind him of a wanderer's protocore. Long before Ivan's generation was born, wanderers had appeared on Earth, and as far as back as he can remember, wanderers roamed the city, prompting people to spend most of their times indoors to avoid them. Many simple tasks were delegated to robots, and people indulged in VR to pass their remaining years. Ivan was taught that wanderers were amalgamations of energy, so why do the victims leave behind substance resembling a protocore after death? Is the material all that remains of the victims? Or could this mystery serial killer be specifically hunting humans who possess such a thing in their bodies? Using this as a criterion, the AI system identifies who will most likely be the next victim. By the time Ivan arrives, Dawnbreaker is already attacking the target. His cold face is hidden by his black coat. Ivan can't make out the sharp object the man wields. He fires his gun. The bullet doesn't hit the murderer, but Ivan's eyes widen when he realizes what's happening. The target, an elderly man who's close to dying, suddenly lunges at Dawnbreaker in one swift moment. Several hook-like tendrils erupt from the man's skin, and one pierces Dawnbreaker's arm. Under the street light, the foreign substance on the old man's body glows a sinister blue, which grows from his skin. Dawnbreaker doesn't even flinch. In his other hand, a slender beam of light appears again. This time, Ivan sees it clearly. It's a shard of ice. The moment it pierces the old man's chest, the tendrils on his body instantly shatter. He's discovered the murder weapon and the origin of the dark blue fragments at the crime scenes. Ivan raises his gun again, but with a wave of Dawnbreaker's hands, both Ivan's hand and the gun are instantly frozen by blackened ice crystals. Ivan couldn't even finish his sentence. An icicle grazes his cheek, pinning his communicator to the wall behind him. The body on the ground dissipates into black mist, leaving Ivan dumbstruck. This resembles the unique way wanderers vanish after being destroyed. He wasn't human? Ivan murmurs to himself. Dawnbreaker's indifferent gaze sweeps over him. Then he turns around, his black coat blending into the shadows of the night. Since that day, Ivan has reviewed the surveillance footage from every crime scene, trying to find that black silhouette. But the individual is an intangible enigma, vanishing into the jumble of pixelated images. However, Ivan's efforts aren't entirely fruitless. The identity of the latest Jane Doe had been revealed. She was a worker in an underground protocore factory and laid off a few months ago. More importantly, she had an 11-year-old boy named Georgie. And it just so happens that an orphanage had recently filed a missing persons report for a boy named Georgie, who was under their care. Ivan's police intuition tells him that following this clue could very well lead him to Dawnbreaker. He firmly is convinced that next time they meet, he'll arrest the serial killer and bring him to justice. Chapter 3. Shelter. Zayne isn't surprised to see the little boy at his apartment door. When he left during the day, he noticed a glass jar full of chocolates placed by the door, like bait setting in a trap. It waited for its prey to be ensnared. A small head peeked out, barely visible behind the stairwell. Zayne chose to ignore him and continued walking downstairs. When Zayne returns, it's already deep into the night. The little boy is asleep by the door, clutching the jar. His small head almost droops to the ground. Hushed mumbles in his dreams. The only thing he can hear clearly is one word: Mom. With the hallway lights off, darkness envelops them. Zayne looks down at the curled up child. He reaches into his coat pocket only to find it empty. He ran out of chocolate. Zayne takes 2 steps forward and kneels down next to the boy. Georgie wakes up from the rustling, opening his eyes to the dark silhouette close by. Cold, pale fingers twist the glass jar's lid. Panicked, Georgie watches a hand pluck out 1 chocolate from the jar, unwrap it, raise it, and place it into the man's mouth. His eyes meet the emotionless gaze, its coldness jolting him awake. Tentatively, Georgie says, "Are you gonna help me?" Zayne silently stands up. Desperate, the boy tugs at the hem of Zayne's coat. "You ate my chocolate. You accepted my payment." Zayne opens the door and walks into the apartment, his coat slipping from Georgie's grasp. However, the door doesn't close. Georgie lifts his head and sees him standing at the doorway, his hand resting on the door. "Are you letting me in?" After Georgie tentatively steps inside, Zayne lets go of the door and walks away. He sits on the sofa. Georgie looks around. The room lacks decorations, and the furniture is extremely simple, with only a hint of humanity is the faint cracks on the grayish-white walls, signs of age and neglect. In the center of the living room is a holographic screen displaying what appears to be a very old TV show. On the screen, a man in a white coat is treating a patient. Georgie cautiously sits on the edge of the sofa and sneaks glances at Zayne. The seemingly emotionless killer is now engrossed in an outdated TV drama. The scene, full of contradictions, gradually emboldens the young boy. "Aren't you tired?" Zayne asks. "What is this? It looks like a TV show from decades ago." In the room, aside from the dialogue from the TV drama, the young boy's voice passes through quietness. "Mom used to say only rich people can afford to go to the doctor." Suddenly, Zayne gets up. Georgie shrinks back, afraid he's about to be thrown out of the apartment. However, Zayne only takes the glass jar from Georgie. He returns to his seat, unwraps a chocolate, and puts it in his mouth. He eats them one after the other as if chocolates were his dinner. Do adults really enjoy sweets like this? As Georgie thinks about it, his stomach grumbles. Zayne's gaze remains fixed on the screen, but he passes the chocolate jar back to him. "Chocolate doesn't make me full," Georgie says. "What do you usually eat?" Zayne pauses, then stands up and opens the refrigerator. Georgie follows him and looks inside, surprised to see a row of bottles filled with nutrient solutions, neatly stacked. "You live on these?" Unfazed, Zayne watches as Georgie, driven by hunger, takes a bottle and drinks it. The bland, flavorless liquid gives an immediate sense of fullness, but it lacks the satisfaction of a real meal. Can somebody who sustains themselves solely on such a liquid be considered human? This question flickers through Georgie's mind as he watches the man who's returned to eating chocolates on the sofa. Yet to label him the Grim Reaper seems too contradictory, when he's clearly fond of something as simple as chocolate. Georgie doesn't dwell on this question for too long, having not slept soundly for several days. He soon succumbs to the overwhelming wave of drowsiness once he relaxes. When Georgie opens his eyes again, sunlight streams through the window and into the living room, making the glass jar on the coffee table sparkle. And the jar, which was brimming with chocolates last night, is only half full. Rubbing his eyes, Georgie sits up on the sofa and sees Zayne carrying a pot with budding jasmines from the bedroom. Wearing a t-shirt, Zayne looks a lot more like a college student who lives next door, rather than the Grim Reaper in a coat. Georgie is stunned, watching him place the pot on the windowsill so it can bask in the sun. Zayne waters and prunes the jasmine. As he gazes at the white bud, the sunlight reflects into Zayne's eyes, lending a soft glow to his otherwise emotionless pupils. "Do you like plants?" As Zayne continues to snip, he shakes his head. "Then, did somebody important give that to you?" Zayne glances down at the boy and remains silent. "What should I do to get you to talk to me?" Georgie's frustration in the endless silence nears despair. He picks up the glass jar from the coffee table, trying one last time. "You've eaten a lot of my chocolate, so you have to help me find out who killed my mom. It must be one of those monsters that chased us before. Only you can help me." Zayne pauses. He puts down the gardening scissors and leaves the jasmine in the sun. Then, he turns and walks into the bedroom. Perplexed, Georgie follows Zayne and sees him opening a closet filled with only black clothes. It's like a wardrobe dedicated to funerals. And aside from the wardrobe and bed, there are no other pieces of furniture in the bedroom. Next to the bed is a holographic screen. Unlike the outdated TV drama in the living room, this displays countless moving green dots. "What's that?" Unsurprisingly, Georgie's question is met with silence. Zayne, wearing his black coat once more, reverts to the Reaper-like appearance that Georgie saw before. Georgie follows Zayne out of the apartment, and they arrive at the convenience store. This time, Zayne heads straight for the refrigerated aisles, methodically scanning rows of various flavored sodas. Eventually, he picks a bottle from the top shelf, its packaging unremarkable. "Is it any good?" Georgie can't help but ask. Zayne pauses for a moment, then grabs another bottle. He also slips a jar of chocolate into Georgie's arms before proceeding to checkout. After leaving the store, Georgie takes a few sips from his soda. The flavor isn't anything extraordinary. Zayne opens his bottle and starts pouring it out. Before Georgie can react, the liquid solidifies in midair. Popsicle? Looks weird. People used to call it an old popsicle. Zayne looks at the popsicle in his hands and takes a bite. He appears to savor the taste. "So you like stuff other than chocolates and nutrient drinks," Georgie adds, even though it's all still very strange. Zayne doesn't mind his comment, and the two walk down the street. There aren't many people around. It is to be expected because wanderers are present, and people prefer to stay indoors as much as possible. The city's outdoors belong to robots, wanderers, and weeds. With a chocolate-filled jar in his arms, Georgie follows Zayne. Zayne takes a long stride, and Georgie has to jog to keep up. Just as he catches up, Zayne suddenly stops, and Georgie almost runs into him. He sees Zayne standing outside an abandoned plaza with an overgrown grass. Following his gaze, a patch of jasmine flowers bloom amidst the decaying city. The vibrant white blossoms stand out in the desolate surroundings. Zayne walks over to the bench, facing jasmines, and sits down. Touching the bench, Georgie realizes it's clean. "Do you come here often?" Zayne doesn't deny it and takes out a book from his coat pocket. Georgie sits down beside him, eating chocolates from the jar. Curious, he looks at the contents of the book. The cover is worn, the text faded. Georgie tilts his head and reads out loud. "Lincoln City Travel Guide? Where's Lincoln City? Do you want to go there?" Zayne grabs a chocolate from the jar and eats it, flipping through the pages of the book. Georgie notices several marked locations in the travel guide. Museums, ski resorts, parks, and some places that seem to be restaurant recommendations. Lincoln City Asco Hospital. This looks like a place from a long time ago. Georgie's eyes widen. Is this book very old? As old as my grandpa? No, it should be even older than that. But I've never met my grandpa. Or my dad, for that matter. Zayne calmly glosses over the boy's mumbled words. Why are you interested in an old city? The boy looks up at him. Zayne stares at the nearby jasmine, something fleeting briefly cracking his emotionless face. I often dream of that place. Chapter 4. Nightmare. Last night, Zayne dreamed that he and a girl bought all kinds of snacks and even froze soda into the shape of a popsicle. Similar dreams visited him almost every night. In these dreams, he's a surgeon. His dreams keep overlapping with scenes of a doctor's life, and a constant reoccurring presence is a girl. He was 12 the first time he had such a dream, but the dreams didn't happen in a particular order. They were fragmented. So, when he was 12, he already knew the doctor in his dreams would meet that girl at 27. With how frequent these dreams are, he slowly thinks that the doctor is him. Or rather, he wants to become the person loved by the girl in his dreams. He records them, hoping to find their traces in the barren city. The place called Lincoln City from years ago, the landmarks that can only be found in travel guides, the foods, flavors, and plants in his dreams, he wants to experience them the best he can. And if possible, he wants the warm dreams to consume him. Zayne steps out of the bathroom, blood still flowing from his arm, from the wound inflicted by the abomination. He looks at his reflection in the mirror to see his scar-riddled body. It's a sight he's grown accustomed to. As usual, he dries himself off and puts on his clothes. The boy is asleep on the couch again. Zayne runs his hand through his hair and grabs a blanket, tossing it over the boy. He sits down and watches the medical drama on the holographic screen. As he eats chocolate, the boy suddenly lets out a scream. Georgie jumps up from the couch, gasping for air. I had a nightmare. Terrified, Georgie looks at the calm Zayne before gradually coming to his senses. I dreamt that there was a monster inside me. It burst out from my chest. The boy's voice trembles, tears welling up in his eyes, as he gives Zayne a pleading look. My mom said dreams are the opposite of reality. Is that true? Zayne thinks for a moment and presses a button on the remote. The screen suddenly changes from the medical drama to an animated film accompanied by a soft female voice. A long time ago, there was a man named Zhuangzi. He dreamt that he was a graceful butterfly. When he woke up, that feeling remained. He couldn't tell if he was a butterfly dreaming of being Zhuangzi, or if Zhuangzi dreamt of being a butterfly. Georgie stares at the screen, where elegant dialogue transforms into dancing butterflies and then into a historical figure. Confused, he mutters, Maybe I'm just a monster's dream? When will it wake up? The boy turns to Zayne. And what about you? You said you were dreaming of a place called Lincoln City. Who are you in your dreams? Zayne switches back to the medical drama, where the protagonist is performing a very risky surgery. Do you dream of being a doctor? Zayne pauses, then nods. Then, do you appear in that doctor's dream? Maybe to him, you're also a nightmare. Zayne looks down at the boy, who appears innocent and concerned. In the dim light, he can tell that Georgie has a small protrusion, a bump, under his eye. Georgie, staring at Zayne's unblinking gaze, can't help but feel a little scared. I was joking. Don't be mad. Behind Zayne's back, a blackened ice blade begins to form in his hand. We're not related, so I understand if you don't want to help me find the killer. The boy lowers his head, unable to meet Zayne's gaze. But I have a request. Tomorrow is my 12th birthday. Can you celebrate it with me? I promise to leave afterward. Zayne is taken aback. The ice blade quietly melts away. Silently, he stands up, turns off the screen, and walks back to his room. Is that a yes? The boy's voice, filled with disbelief, resounds behind him. In Zayne's bedroom, on the screen, a red dot begins to grow amidst the countless green ones. The coordinates of a red dot show that it's right next to Zayne. Just before the alarm rings, Zayne turns off the screen. Good night. His voice is cold. He closes the bedroom door. Chapter 5. Birthday. The next day, Zayne goes through his usual routine of moving the jasmine to the windowsill to soak up sunlight. He waters it, and after that, he puts on the black coat and takes the boy with him. Zayne leads Georgie to a dessert place, where the robots behind the glass window are diligently making cakes and pastries. Is this for me? The boy's face is filled with surprise. Zayne taps on the holographic menu and adds a macaroon to their meal. He turns to meet the boy's curious gaze. I dreamt about it last night. The boy's eyes widen. The doctor in your dreams ate a macaroon? Another person did as well, Zayne says, taking a seat by the window. Georgie sits down with Zayne. Will the doctor also dream of you celebrating my birthday? Zayne looks out the floor-to-ceiling window. Maybe. They are the only customers here. The robots play Happy Birthday and bring out a cake with 12 candles. Georgie's face lights up with a smile for the first time. Besides my mom, you're the first person to celebrate my birthday with me. He clasps his hand together and closes his eyes. My wish is to find the person who killed my mom. When he opens his eyes, a subtle blue glow emanates under his skin. Georgie smiles at Zayne and blows out the candles in one breath. They devour the cake, and a bit of frosting accidentally lands on Georgie's face. It reveals a childlike innocence that matches his age. When's your birthday? The boy looks up. Zayne eats the colorful macaroon. I don't celebrate birthdays. You never celebrated your birthday before? The boy's eyes widen. I stopped after I turned 12. Why? The macaroon's overwhelming sweetness fills his mouth, but Zayne still wants another. Zayne's dreams began on his 12th birthday. His adopted father became an abomination, hook-like tendrils growing inside him. He attacked his wife and son. Zayne watched helplessly as his adoptive mother died before his eyes. When his adoptive father lunged at him, Zayne chose to use his evil. He stabbed the ice into his adoptive father's heart. That was Zayne's first kill. It was also the first time freezing an abomination, preventing them from turning into a wanderer. He never celebrated his birthday ever since. Later that night, he dreamt of himself in a doctor's white coat, treating a girl. Dreams have become his only solace ever since. Even after the cake is finished, Zayne doesn't reply. Determined, Georgie lowers his head. When it's your birthday, I'll bring you different kinds of chocolate. Astonished, Zayne looks at the boy. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window, the sun sinks into the horizon, casting a brilliant yet melancholic glow upon the desolate city. The sunset is so pretty. Georgie gazes out the window in awe. I used to live with my mom in a dorm at the factory. It doesn't have windows, so I've only seen sunsets at VR games. Zayne suddenly asks, what if you look at the sunset and feel nothing at all one day? What's the difference between that and being dead? Georgie turns, displaying a maturity beyond his years. Mom used to say that dying with clarity is better than living like a corpse. All of a sudden, chaotic footsteps resound. Dozens of heavily armed police officers come into view, surrounding the dessert place with their guns raised. Bewildered, Georgie looks at Zayne. Detective Ivan walks in, raising his hands to show he's unarmed. "We can go negotiate as long as you let the child go." Panicked, Georgie stands up. "We were just celebrating my birthday." Ivan looks at the candles and cake crumbs on the table, unable to hold back his anger. "He is the person who murdered your mother." Zayne remains motionless. Taking this opportunity, Ivan steps forward and positions the boy behind him. However, when he turns around him, the boy no longer looks human. A tendril below his eye has erupted through his skin, blood flowing down like crimson tears. "Georgie?" Ivan freezes. The tendril extends as if it had a life of its own and hooks onto his arm. While the pain shoots through Ivan's arm, the blackened ice shard in Zayne's hand had already pierced Georgie's chest. Everything unfolds before Ivan's eyes in an instant. Georgie lowers his head, seeing blackened ice bloom like a flower on his chest. He stumbles and falls to the ground. His last sight being Zayne kneeling beside him. Tears well up in Georgie's eyes. "What happened? Did the monster wake up?" Zayne gently closes the boy's eyes. Georgie dissipates into black mist. The melody of Happy Birthday continues to echo in the dessert place under the setting sun. It's a final farewell. Final chapter. Chapter 6. Cover-up. On a quiet hillside, 2 tombstones stand. One big and one small. Neither has photos or names. Zayne places a jar of chocolate in front of the small tombstone. He remembers the woman buried here. She approached him half a month ago, pleading for him to kill her. "I know some wanderers were once human." She was frail but determined. "Some of my coworkers turned into monsters. Terrifying things grew from their bodies. They attacked people and became wanderers. I think it's related to our prolonged exposure to protocours. But the factory has kept this information a secret. When I try to report it, they kick me out." She extends her right hand, where a coin-sized bump had already formed on her knuckle. "At this rate, I'll probably turn into one of them, right? When you saved me and my son, I knew you were someone who hunts monsters. I don't want to become a wanderer. I'm afraid that one day I'll lose control and hurt my son. It's better to die with clarity than live as a corpse." With tears in her eyes, the woman smiles. "Please, kill me." The sound of footsteps pulls Zayne out of his reminiscing as a thin, middle-aged detective approaches. He places a bouquet of flowers between the 2 tombstones. Gazing at the small tombstone, Ivan's heart feels an indescribable heaviness. "I've always wondered, did you know from the start that that child would turn? Is that why you kept him by your side?" Zayne reaches into his pocket and pulls out 2 chocolates. He hands one to Ivan. Ivan hesitates for a moment, and then takes it. "I'm not sure how many people actually know, but the wanderers that roam the city now are not just energy clusters, like they were in the beginning. Some of them were once human. My reports have been suppressed, and my family has received death threats. The higher-ups don't want people to know." Zayne silently unwraps the chocolate and puts it in his mouth. How long do they want to hide it? Perhaps one day, this world will be overrun by wanderers. Ivan suppresses the unease in his chest and takes a bite of chocolate. "All I can do now is stop the investigation on Dawnbreaker and destroy the records. That way no one will ever know of your existence. Hopefully, this will buy you more time to prevent the world from collapsing." Zayne looks at the detective. "I hope this will be our last meeting." Ivan forces a smile. "Yeah. If I see you again, does that mean I'm going to turn into a wanderer?" His expression becomes solemn, his smile gone. "If the time comes, please don't hesitate to kill me." Ivan watches Zayne's dark silhouette fade into the blood-red sunset. He murmurs to himself, "This time, justice stands with the Grim Reaper." A familiar melody drifts through the darkness. It's happy birthday? Happy birthday, Dr. Zayne. The girl's clear voice rings out. Her smile is warm like the morning sun. Is he dreaming again? From now on, I'll always be by your side for your birthday. The girl's sincere yet slightly shy expression makes him unable to resist the urge to caress her cheek. He lowers his head and discovers they're holding hands. He reaches out, but right before touching the girl's cheek, she suddenly looks shocked. You aren't Dr. Zayne. Who are you? Zayne abruptly wakes up. A gray wall stares back at him. The alarm resounds, and the holographic screen starts flickering red again. Zayne takes a deep breath. What did that dream mean? How did the girl see him? It's as if she saw through time and space, through his dreams, to realize he's not a doctor. Zayne's gaze sweeps over the windowsill. The jasmine quietly blooms under the moonlight.